what the effect of social semiotics as a catalyst can be. So, working?
Yes, it's just the laptop is slow.
I'll pause and welcome our next participant. One good thing about a small group is that each new person has a significant effect on the structure of the whole. And so the whole that we were dealing with before our friend here, could you tell me what your name is? Tatiana? Right, thank you. Her name I know. What area of studies? Linguistics.
Yeah, but
it's difficult. It will open eventually, but it will take some time. Totally, this could be very slow.
Right.
I'm doing my last attempt and then I try to set it up just through my laptop.
One of the things I was saying to the audience is that the way of seeing that everything has meaning. So verbal codes, obviously we know they have meaning. Semiotics is a way of seeing meaning of different kinds everything has meaning. And some of these meanings are quite obvious. What is the meaning of a slow computer?
Bad funding.
So, just the basic semiotic principle. You see what a meaning is and whose meaning it is. Or social semiotics, you always ask whose meaning is it. So, whose meaning is it for a computer to be slow? Yes, God, the institution. Above God is a little bigger God than God. Whatever only body supply attitudes, priorities. One of the important
It's all set now, Bob.
one of the important things that are we in business?
Yeah.
Right, good. So is this the
No, you just use the laptop keyboard.
just right? So
If I want, I can switch it for you and you just go on and I will be switching to it.
no, I found it. That's fine.
Okay? Okay.
Partly using that PowerPoint to communicate information. Everything has always got a social symbol message also. I'm communicating alongside that text. I'm talking. That's already two modes of communication: so speech and writing. A third aspect of my communication is that I am sitting here. So that message in that form could, if this whole class was recorded, you could perhaps be watching a version of that on the screen, and you would be sitting somewhere else. The fact that I'm here talking, I've come all the way from Australia, and I can tell you that's something you don't really want to do too often. I've come all the way from Australia. You've come from the various places you come from. So I'm here talking to you. My body is here. Your bodies are there. You can see the bodies of the others. All of this is rich social semiotic information. And we take it for granted so much we don't think it's about meaning. But everything is about meaning, and many of the important meanings stated by social semiotics are meanings which attach themselves to other meanings, inflect them, help you to understand the weight of a communication, so that what I'm saying here is similar to what is written there. You could move between the two. You process them in different times and spaces and in different ways, and you constantly put different messages in different modes together. So what I've written there is some basic framing sentences introducing social semiotics. That's what I'm doing. I call it a meta-discipline. I don't know if you. Meta is a very useful preposition which comes from Greek. Aristotle unfortunately messed with the Greek. We can't blame him anymore because he's refused to take mail. You know, I've tried, but I just can't get across to him my displeasure. And what he did, the word meta, which just in Greek it just means with or after. He wrote a series of books, and he had one on physics, and the one after that was on philosophy and higher things. So he called it metaphysics. So, you know, physics after physics, no big deal. But because Aristotle was Aristotle, people thought this must be a very profound thing to say. So metaphysics is somehow hovering above physics, explaining it in abstract, mysterious ways. So it's become a useful term in English and other disciplines, whereby you can talk of meta-communication, for instance. Communication is hovering above communication, explaining it, negotiating how it works, and meta-discipline. So I use Aristotle's mistake called social semiotics and use the word which he didn't even mean to invent, but he did invent it. So I use it to describe something like social semiotics and the role it plays. If he hadn't invented the word we would really need it, because philosophy doesn't quite cut it. Philosophy of psychology, philosophy of sociology, or whatever, it's doing the job of taking this perspective from above, but the word meta is a really useful one. Try it out in a Russian context. Here we've got an idea for inventing a new word in Russian, starting with meta. Anyway, I'll leave it for later, but it's a very nice thing to be able to do, because the word creates a conceptual space which you really need to understand. That's one of the things that language does. Language creates realities, and that's what linguistics to some degree does, but linguistics is not keen to do that. So you can add semiotics as metalinguistics, for instance. It's a reflection on semiotics grows fairly closely out of linguistics, the study of verbal language. Linguistics needs a kind of subject called metalinguistics and social semiotics. So, in the form that I presented, it's inflected by theories of chaos and complexity. So, not all forms of semiotics take on board chaos and complexity. I think it's a very interesting and powerful current that helps social semiotics much more easily to be a metadiscipline. Chaos and complexity are words in common use. So you can see descriptions of street marches or something as chaotic. People use, I'm sure that there's a Russian word for complexity, is there? All the European languages have a similar word. The chaos and complexity comes from those popular conceptions of language through science and back into a meta level of meta science, where they become available for use for rethinking every discipline. And so that's one of the things that I'll be sharing with you, just how beautiful these ideas are. And along with that goes another thing which for me is increasingly important in social semiotics, that is the idea that we can, in whatever discipline we come from, everyone here is basically from the humanities, social sciences side of the academy. One of the lessons which I hope you'll finish up finding the most valuable of all from this is that reuniting the whole field of humanities and social sciences with the physical sciences is just so long overdue. It's so healing. And one of the things that I would say here is that that division is a false and stultified one, even though in most social science disciplines students are inculcated with the idea that there's something fake about making that connection. What is fake is the voices saying no. There is no reason not to do it. And over the course of lectures, I'll be suggesting just how fruitful it is to suppose that you can read anything inside. For instance, this week in the journal Science, the International Journal of Science, there are 6 articles on language in the brain. And obviously they're highly scientific, they're about neurology and all that sort of thing. Everyone in this room could read it. It might be a bit hard going at times, but so that's the issue of October, of science. One of the 2 leading science journals in the world, you could read it. And you then, in an instant, will be ahead of just about probably everyone in your current field. It's as easy to do that. I can just pick it up and read it, wrestle with it, understand it, get something from it, and what you get from it is going to be valid. These ideas are from my book, Social Semiotics for a Complex World, 2017. I now want to move on to here social semiotics as catalyst. In English, I imagine it's a similar case in Russian. Catalyst is a word used in everyday speech. In English, a top manager might see or call himself or herself a catalyst, by which they're implying they're an agent of change. It's not usually given a serious scientific meaning. But that's what I've just said. Is so productive and it's completely legitimate. So instead of using it as an almost empty metaphor, social semiotics is a catalyst, social semiotics is cool or quite good or something. Taking seriously the idea of catalyst is something that you can all do. A catalyst is an interesting concept. It was it's sometimes hard to be absolutely clear when the absolute origin of things are in intellectual history. But currently in intellectual history, 1794, a woman, Elizabeth, what's her name, Fromingham, Fulhome, that's right, in 1794, a woman, I repeat, produced this idea and with experiments that proved it. What the idea of a catalyst, I'll be saying in 1794 there were no Nobel Prizes around. There would be 100 years before there would be a Nobel Prize. When one was finally handed out to a man, surprise, surprise, in 1907, he was following in the footsteps. So anyway, she had the breakthrough. There's another guy, Berzelius, in the middle of the 19th century. This guy in the 20th century fine-tuned the idea and got a Nobel Prize. But that shows how scientifically important the idea is. What a catalyst does is the first example in science of non-linear causality. Non-linear causality is a very powerful idea animating chaos and complexity theory. Non-linear causality means there's a discrepancy between the cause and the effect. Catalysts are probably the first known illustration of non-linear causality. Obviously, Elizabeth didn't call it that or see it as that, but in hindsight, that's what she was inventing. Not simply identifying the process of catalyst, but a phenomenon so new that it's still deserving Nobel Prizes 100 years after she first wrote it. So just breaking the idea down in easy to understand steps. Basically, a catalyst allows a substance X to combine with another substance Y to form a new substance Z. And this is the amazing, magical causality, which is actually throughout science. How do you get put two substances together, A plus B, and the outcome is not A plus B, it's Z, which is just completely unlike what you ever thought. Non-linear causality. And that's the kind of thing to be looking for in society, in language, in meaning, everywhere. It just creates a sense of wonder. So the way it happens is, as I said, X. In the classic cases, X doesn't easily combine with Y. But if you put them together, after a while, you get a bit of Z. A catalyst. You put a catalyst in, and there's a chain of reactions take place, and instead of X and Y just sort of sitting together and just slightly merging, you get Z. And it's just amazing, remarkable. It's like magic. And something like it happens throughout language. If you put any two words together, they can count as X and Y. So you could put the word present, and the word Trump, and you put it together, and it's just President Trump, a person called Trump who's president. However, there can be a catalytic effect in which those two concepts merge in such a way that the president no longer means anything like president. Z is President Trump, the scandal of America. The language does that all the time. The meaning of sentences is not predictable, adding A to B. Sometimes there is amazing alchemy, and if there is amazing alchemy, you need to look at what has enabled it. So, getting back to this exchange, if you add the catalyst, so X plus C, that becomes XC, and you compound because the catalyst combines easily with X. And then you put XC, this new substance, in with Y, and Y happily combines with it and produces what you want, which is Z, a compound with C and Z, and then C and Z happily decompose, and so you're left with catalyst you start with, and the Z that you want to get all the time. And this process is 4 or 5 stages. It can actually be quite quick, quicker, more efficient, and in fact, 90% of all industrial chemical reactions use catalysts. 100% of all organic chemical reactions use catalysts. So a catalyst turns out to be an absolutely fundamental, all-pervasive thing in the physical world. So why not look for it in the world of words, meanings, and people? With people, just adding, well, if you regard people as just individual atoms, you put them together, you won't imagine anything happening. But putting some people together, the result is explosively the Z of love, or the what's another letter? K of murder. Or, throughout social life, mediated by language, there's a whole array of surprisingly different outcomes which go much faster. The catalyst for putting a male and a female, or a male and male, together, the catalyst will be hormones and other things. But through catalysts, the forces and resources of science, understood through science, can play an immediate and decisive role. I don't want to spend too long on catalysts. I'll just note that this is an easy chemical sequence to understand. It's a classic one. if you really go into catalysts, you'll find that there's different forms and conditions of it. Organic and non-organic are different. Sometimes the catalyst survives completely, sometimes it's altered. There's a variety of things which happen, but that variety of things is comprehensible in terms of a simple diagram like that, and that diagram, as I'm saying, I'm treating it not as a metaphor, I'm treating it as a phenomenon which is well described in the physical world and is worth looking at for its comparable qualities in the social, psychological, semiotic world. Right, social semiotics. Implicit in the account of catalysts, what catalysts do is they primarily act on boundaries and make boundaries lower. So X and Y, high boundary, catalyst comes in and sort of tricks them into a number of alliances, a network which finishes with them coming together in a set. That kind of process is one of the things that social semiotics does well. But in a way, you don't actually need social semiotics for that. You could use a social semiotic line task. You could look at a whole series of boundaries, which you look at. You think this boundary. If you're looking at sort of states, boundaries between states, borders, relationships with people. You can think they are set in concrete. However, if you just have the orientation of boundaries, that from a social semiotic perspective, a boundary is a complex functional space. In the biological world, boundaries are always full of holes, porous, permeable, and that's because one-way barriers, efficient barriers, are lethal. Every organism needs a flow between the inside and the outside. They need to protect themselves to different degrees from threats from the outside. And so there's an elaborate set of walls to achieve that. But too tight a boundary literally kills. I'll tell you something. I'm prefacing it by saying I don't know that this is a fact because I got it from a film, but I'll repeat it and say so. If you respond to it with due caution, I believe that if a person is painted over completely with some paint, gold paint or whatever, I got this from the James Bond film. So, sorry about that. someone who's painted completely over cannot breathe through the skin and will die. Whether that is a true fact, it certainly is the case that all boundaries, boundaries typically are natural formations, but they never should be absolute. There's always a need for exchange between inside and outside. Otherwise, the larger organism, will die. So the cell membrane, for instance, has got a rich set of apertures. I didn't get this from James Bond. Well, I haven't seen all the James Bond. Maybe it was James Bond that's used. Cells in the body need to be in a flow of nutrients. They need to be able to absorb some and use them, expel others. They need to be in control of exchange. That's why I said a boundary in a complex space. It's always got two functions, either to protect or to incorporate. And you can see the analogy with social organisms, states, societies, the same basic functions are about life. So, for instance, looking at the medieval castle, the medieval castles have high walls, strong boundaries, keeping people out, maintaining the power of the powerful. That created a system which finally collapsed because you can't invest so much money in resources in keeping people out. Every wall, boundary, or whatever needs to have two-way flows, and this is true. Think of your friends, your relationships. Every entity needs to have boundaries, and they also need to be able to start again. An organism which can only make war, not love, will not live, will not survive. The dual imperatives, the complex social relations, which are necessary for the smallest amoeba to say Moscow or something, megapolis. The same fundamental law applies. There have to be multiple boundaries. They must both repel and be porous. So social semiotics is a transformative paradigm applied to disciplines. First of all, every discipline creates boundaries around it. Or, more precisely, the people controlling every discipline create boundaries around it, which are both intellectual maps and also create communities of control. So the two kinds of border or boundary are not the same. The tension between them is a dynamic social process. But applying to this thinking to disciplines, I'll try to remember. So Maria, social psychology. Is that linguistics?
I studied linguistics.
What's that?
I studied. I used to study linguistics.
Right. So now you're studying. Social, well, I'll start with linguistics then. Within the community of linguistics, are you made aware of the boundaries around the subject matter? What is the end of the subject linguistics and what is non-linguistics?
What is linguistics and what is
Yeah, where does linguistics end? In the way it's presented to you.
So when I worked in my master's thesis on apologizing in German language, I saw that I noticed that I lacked some studies on social psychology. So for me, maybe I lacked some theories on social psychology to connect it with linguistics, because I saw that my master's thesis could be, I could broaden it with it.
Right. So linguistics, social psychology, Z. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Thinking about the disciplinary options, the boundaries, which are limitations. They're actually meant to be limitations. They both control students, but they also control the students. So a linguist knows who she is, and she's not a social psychologist, unless she is. But disciplines are comfortable with certain boundaries corresponding to the boundaries around the discipline. And that's where social semiotics, I think, can play a catalytic role, catalytic in the sense that it lowers the boundaries, doesn't remove them. It lowers them and sees other ways around the borders around. So, in a sense, social semiotics helps a discipline to breathe. That's a discipline as a body of knowledge devoted to a topic organised in communities. One of the sociological outcomes of disciplinary practices is to make it more and more difficult for people in one discipline to talk to people in any other discipline. This is not a plot which evil people sit down and plan. This is a normal sociological process of community processes associated with disciplinary formations. So creating and maintaining boundaries, that's a process which social semiotics doesn't say shouldn't be happening. It says you can be more in control of it. If you see who is doing it and why, and you can ask yourself, do I want to do that? Because, I think I'm suggesting from social semiotics, the world we all want to understand goes beyond any discipline. And so, if we're asking why interdisciplinarity, well, there's two questions about interdisciplinarity. I think I'm having trouble maintaining the boundaries around my slide. And that illustrates that crossing boundaries is an important fact to be able to do. It's something that you want to be in control of so that your boundaries are not crossed when you don't want them crossed. Because boundaries form a life-preserving function. There's an idea from the sciences called autopoiesis. Autopoiesis is an idea from biology. It literally means self-making. And the guys who came up with it were concerned with a definition of life itself, from the smallest to the largest level. Living forms always create a surrounding membrane within which they could develop their own coherence. So without that boundary, you have no self. So far from boundaries being obviously bad, they're actually obviously totally necessary. But then you can in many cases you just need to be able to transform it. So I've switched to another. I'll just say briefly with the scales. I'll keep on mentioning boundaries that social semiotics loosen up. It may be useful to give the Greek etymology of catalyst, which is similar to analyst. Kata and ana actually inverse prepositions. Kata means down, ana means up. Typically, the connotation of kata is it's more savage. So ana Anna is gently rising, Canada is crashing down. But lusus is the same, and it's just close to the English word loosening. What's the Russian word meaning loose?
Расслабленный.
Anyway, to familiarise it, it's sometimes useful to sort of move from a word which has been so fixed for so long as catalyst and analyst. They just basically mean loosening up in order to understand better. Analysis is a gentle form of it. So if you think of analysis as looking at something and non-destructively, just seeing how it works, loosening the bonds though. So the underlying idea is that you will understand better if you loosen the bonds. Catalyst is a more drastic loosening. That's what happened in the process I described. X and Y were dismantled, reconnected through the catalyst and put together again. A catalyst does violence. Analysis is a more gentle but the same process, and so analysis can help you to look at the barriers and loosen them. The fundamental, the barriers between various disciplines of humanities and social sciences, politics, sociology, they're pretty similar, and a catalytic effect which made them more similar, I think, will usually be productive. That's where social semiotics will be emphasizing the role of meaning, common meanings across sociology and politics. Psychology, it's interesting, social psychology is actually bringing sociology and psychology together. When you get there, you find that there's a boundary around it which disconnects it from both psychology and sociology. That's how these things work. So a social semiotic catalytic attention to, say, a construct like social psychology should enable you to sort of say, well, I could be more of a psychologist than they think I could be, more of a sociologist. I can combine them in new ways. And politics, economics, all of these culminate disciplines. Would benefit from a bit of loosening. They kept unproductively apart, certainly in terms of understanding the complex, interrelated world we live in. You need loosening. So that across the board of everyone in this room, fewer barriers. Two ways of doing that is to just feeling free to talk across disciplinary boundaries. This is just a kind of anecdote. A mark of a PhD student in their final year is that they cannot talk about their topic at the party. If you're an exception to this, well, that's fantastic. But that is the occupational deformity of doing a PhD. And the recipe, of course, is a social semiotic catalyst. There are many boundaries in intellectual life, but they tend to be variations of the core triad. Every interesting and important problem in the world involves the interrelation between society, meaning, and the material world. And because the different disciplines position themselves away from that central complex object of study, students in those disciplines tend to be shifted aside, disabled from being able to understand the other two bodies in that three-body system. So, so just finishing up with a reflection on interdisciplinarity, which is the main one of my main motives in coming to talk to you. Two questions about interdisciplinarity. One, why is it so necessary? And the answer to that is because that is how the world is. The second question is, why is it so hard? And people don't usually ask that, because they don't realise just how hard it actually is in practice, because most people don't really try. So when I say you need to be more interdisciplinary, I'm saying you need to use the powerful catalyst of social semiotics to loosen up your identity as a psychologist, whatever, to be able to reach out and connect with a world of social meanings and material facts. And disciplines make it hard for you to do that. However, my encouraging words to you tonight are that there are huge rewards if you can do that. You will become both a more original psychologist, or whatever, and also more directly relevant to everyone in this world who is struggling to understand and act better in it. I've talked longer than I meant to. I don't quite know how these things are organised, but it might be useful if if people ask any questions they have on this first part of it.
I have not only a question, but I would like to use the chance and propose you to rest your sign on Umberto Eco's book.
Oh, right.
Yes, let
Which one?
this, I'm sorry, semiotist or semiotician.
Yes.
Semiotician,
Yes.
please. Oh, you have your own pen,
Right.
and this is out.
Right. Well, I'm sure.
Take it. The local pen of this university.
Right. So, this is in
I
Russian.
think, yes, of course.
Yes. So, right. So, address it to you or to?
I'd like to just write what you want. My name is Igor. His name is Umberto. Your name there is the best one. A catalyst of our reaction.
Right.
But I had a question indeed. What about your agenda in comparison with Bruno Latour's agenda, his social epistemology, and especially his work of 2014 with 14 or 15. I remember precisely about 14 modis of discourses. And among them, there is a modus of differing other modus. Just like your SS, but with another effect. Increasing boundaries, not diminishing them.
Yes.
But the agenda is similar, I suppose. What about your relations with Bruno Latour?
Well,
Thank you very much. Take it
yes.
yourself, of course. This is our pen for you.
Latour, do people know Bruno Latour? Do people know Bruno Latour? Right. Yeah. I love his work. He's a very important, partly crazy thinker. He is very French in the good.
So you are very Aussie.
What's that?
So you are very Aussie.
And I am, yes. The French tradition and things, generalizations can be made about traditions. It encourages a level of abstraction and an apparent disdain for empirical data, which people in the Anglo-American tradition find difficult, and maybe people in the Russian tradition do too. But Bruno Latour's work on a particular area of social life, science, the making of science, is based on deep and thoughtful research. He's an innovative semiotician, but not a core theorist of semiotics. He was able to see or concentrate on one science system within scientific work. So he discovered there were signs where others hadn't looked for them. That was very beautiful work. Any?
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question about the concept of catalyst, the way you use it. Well, the way you see it, can we use word catalyst like directly in social semiotics, or is it a metaphor? So, is it kind of a transdisciplinary concept that can be easily taken from chemistry and put into social studies, or is it a mere metaphor, or is it both? I don't know. How does it work for you?
I've got problems with the term mere metaphor. Because a metaphor is bringing two things together, and the degree of seriousness is a continuum all the way down to an analogy which is profoundly believed in. So metaphors include the idea of putting things together, but also the level of belief. So a metaphor, metaphors as typically understood are more or less defined as something which is both true and not true. So two things are put together. It's very like a catalyst. The Z that comes out is includes more or less of a reality between the two elements. So the trouble with talking of a mere metaphor is it implies there's just two levels. There's a mere metaphor, and then there's something else. It's actually a whole continuum of more and more wide-ranging catalytic transformations of the two terms. So that I'm trying to find a non-binary term for it, but the trouble with metaphors, and if you look at the field of science, that makes it especially problematic because scientists claim not to use metaphors. That's what poets and so on use. But actually, scientists have always thought at the deepest level in metaphors, putting the whole areas of life together. They don't try and signal so strongly that it's a metaphor or a problem of belief. But I'm trying to think of an example. Einstein's descriptions of a universe stretching, that's obviously a metaphor, but it's absolutely fundamental to his thought. So in fact, the mathematics he does on the elasticity of the universe, which is a metaphor, is actually the best mathematics for elasticity. So in his thinking, he's taken both sides of the metaphor absolutely seriously, and people don't he's a well, I think he's a scientist, not a poet. But what's the difference?
Well, may I add a couple of words about semiotic relations between semiotic and catalysis.
Yes, yes.
I think this relation is not, it's a risky statement, but I'm going to say it, and I'm really afraid of being heavily criticized. But I would say that there's a direct, non-metaphoric relation between catalysis and semiotics. Because actually catalysis, if we take Elizabeth Fulham's works, she actually indicated not relations when catalyst enters into reaction. She actually investigated first the role of sunlight radiation upon certain chemical processes. And actually there's a big class of catalysts who are not actually entering into chemical reactions. So what they're doing? The question is what they're doing. It's quite clear what catalyst which enters into reaction is doing. It decreases, like it was described by Bob. It's a standard explanation. But there are many catalysts who do not actually enter into this, like sunlight radiation. I would claim that this type of catalysts are signals and not signs, but they are already signals. They signal beginning of radiation. So some agent, like sun, signals that certain processes could start. Interesting. So it's if we look where from science emerged, and we discussed this earlier today, you remember, during our session. Well, because we discussed extended semiosis, this extension of semiosis first from anthroposemiotics into biosemiotics and then further on into all other exosemiotics. So, frankly speaking, if we are to look for a pretender to claim the role of a proto-sign, it would be a catalyst of some kind. It could be. Of course, you would immediately say that it's not that clear, it's not actually signifying anything, it's not actually signal, where from the signal comes from. We also discussed this agency. Missing agency, as long as we go away from the domain of anthroposemiosis and into the actual semiosis, agency disappears. At least agency as it is known in anthroposemiosis. That's why now biosemioticians are looking for the ways how to investigate agency. Alexei Sharov, for example, is very actively working on this, and not only him, some other agents, some other colleagues of ours. I'm very grateful for this idea of catalysis, because when I was thinking of where something like semiosis begins, I was thinking about all kind of a more complicated chemical processes like cyclic reactions and so on and so forth. But it seems that catalysis is already playing the role of some signal. And actually, catalysis is involved in making all these oscillating reactions possible.
Right. Thank you. That's very interesting. And thank you for bringing out the range of Elizabeth's work. She did indeed, as Misha said, focus on the role of light. In fact, she sort of invented a kind of photography. And the catalyst, as I described it, is a fairly narrow linear process, but heat has a catalytic effect. So if you explore, well, one of the things I really liked about what Mish is doing as an exemplary contribution he was using the metaphor to think with, and that's just a great thing to do. The traditional view of metaphor was that it's just an ornament. So you know what you're wanting to say, and you use a metaphor to make it more colourful or whatever. That's a waste of a semiotic power of metaphors. In any field, use metaphors to think with, you'll come up with new, powerful, original ideas, which if you want to stay safely in that discipline, you just translate into the terms of that discipline. So, catalysts, as I'm pushing them, are a condition for foster creativity and originality, which, like boundaries, you should be in complete control of. If it benefits you to seem as original as you are, let it hang out. There are many. I had some experiences earlier in my quite early in my academic life. I was in an undergraduate class, and there was one student in the class who was psychology. No, it was, yeah, I think it was psychology. Anyway, this student, he was in his 40s. He was incredibly widely read, intelligent, and so on. He produced an essay, which I read. I was just, I was sort of 19 or so. I was just amazed. This guy was thinking well beyond what I was capable of. And he got a B for this essay because his teacher was so threatened. But right, there's a lesson there about disciplinarity, and so I'm aware of that when I'm saying to you, be as original as you want to be, as you can be, cross boundaries, but be in control of the boundaries you cross and getting back to the other side. Because in spite of what people say, there are no necessarily rewards built in for originality. I'm meant to be inspiring you, so forget I said that. Yeah.
I have a question on the status of semiotics. Like you said, it's about studying catalysts, but is it some kind of methodology, theory, or or simply it is the nature of beings? about semiotics. So,
Yes.
Big question.
Yeah. It's both a specific discipline for understanding meanings in all modes. I've been going to illustrate, but I don't know if I've got time or energy. Yeah, analytic categories. It's a very good way of understanding meanings in all forms. So media, literature, philosophy, sociology. It's good for analysing works of art, pictures, press photographers, TV. So yeah, it's a methodology for analysing those. Social semiotics grew out of critical discourse analysis, and critical discourse analysis, which I also played a role in promoting, provides a number of methods of analysing the political content of, or political implications of verbal text. So social semiotics, in a way, builds on the analysis of verbal text to include many other science systems. Yes, in the book I wrote, there's going to be many helpful ways of doing a social semiotic reading of a text. So there's that, and social semiotics as a big area.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Giving it back to you, where does social semiotics end?
Right. Have you stopped beating your wife? Have a price that should end. In my idea of social semiotics, it's actually a space for the interaction of society, meaning, and reality. Because all meanings are social, all meanings are carried by codes, all meanings are related to the material world. So those three are in a constant in the spiral, but there is a boundary around that activity, and the value of studying the interaction of them is concentrated, is more or less concentrated. So intellectual spaces where social semiotics isn't appropriately set up to be the catalytic discipline. But really the answer is how long is a piece of string? You know, it's a judgment that the value, the payoff of that analysis is a diminishing return, because you're so far from what social semiotics does especially well is see how meanings are always affected by and affecting social life, always drawing on covering material realities, and how it does all of those together. And it's seeing them working together, which is what social semiotics does so well. And if your problems don't need you to see that interaction, then you drift off from it.
But you have to have these three elements in your phenomenon to it to be relevant for social semiotics. Let's say we have a process that has only reality and meaning, like I don't know, some very like physical process of catalysis, literal catalysis.
Right.
Does it mean that this is where the social semiotics ends and something else starts?
Could you repeat that?
Well, let's say you said that social semiotics deals with social meaning, society meaning, and reality. Let's say we have a process that doesn't have like social aspect in there, like no societies emerged yet. Does it mean that those phenomena are not relevant for social semiotics?
I think you have to be careful in defining those terms. The social, for instance, if you're looking at, say, the structure of DNA, the structure of DNA is just a wonderfully, incredibly marvelous semiotic system. And I'd want to be studying it without having to say that God did it, because there's problems with that. So you need to sort of have a flexible sense of what social is, and look for something not social as we understand it, but one in which meanings are affected by interacting participants. And so the immediate creator of DNA are parents. Parents and so on, all the way back. But if you understand the immediate social society creating DNA as parents, then it raises interesting questions, I think, about really why DNA is as it is, the language of DNA is as it is, who it's talking about. And scientists tend not to do that. I mean, they just crack DNA and they want to sort of take it from any living use and splice genes and all that sort of thing. If you see that as a kind of brutal interrogation, I think you may. I may seem to be using a metaphor as social, and as I kept saying about metaphors, as an open connection. So if you look for a society of DNA, DNA is designed as an interacting language. I mean, everyone's DNA code is their father or their mother and vice versa. And so, where does that idea lead? I think it's an interesting place which science is reluctant to go. And so social semiotics, using social in a metaphorical sense, can go there. So that, so you take that back to the birth of DNA, of when the primitive organisms had something to share.
Mm-hmm.
At that early stage, they just passed DNA between them,
Mm-hmm.
and what a conversation.
So it's social. If they share DNA, it's social already for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very broad definition of social.
Yeah.
Very broad definition of social.
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So if social semiotics is a catalyst, it means that social semiotics can affect other disciplines, but those disciplines do not affect social semiotics, right? Do you think that would be not really productive for them to affect social semiotics, or is it just, objectively impossible to affect social semiotics using other disciplines?
Very interesting point. I was presenting the classic description of catalysts, which is that they are not affected by the process. Actually, in the range of catalytic phenomena, especially in organic catalysts, they are affected. There's a really important form of catalyst called auto catalyst. With an auto catalyst, the process produces a catalyst which then feeds back to the original process, which then produces more catalyst in a spiraling effect. And that would be the model for semiotics that I would have, so that it's very much social semiotics affected by this process. And I think that applying social semiotics to new areas, it actually always does change. So, the theory needs to be adapted because the reality is, as you say.
Can I ask one last question?
Right.
One last question from me. I will control myself after that. Can there be non-social semiotics then?
Sorry?
Can there be non-social semiotics? What is
semiotics which is not social?
Yeah, and what it is then?
Yeah. Well, most semiotics regards itself as just semiotics, not social at all. So absolutely easy for it to exist, and it already does. I believe that non-social semiotics, well, just the history of non-social semiotics is that they produce meanings which don't go anywhere. They circle around themselves. The social part pushes the semiotic process out of just the codes into the social processes which act through the construction of meaning. So I just see social semiotics as the most valid and interesting form of semiotics. But obviously people can just concentrate on well, sociology. Is it possible to have sociology without a concern with meaning? Yeah, sadly, that's a dominant form of sociology. I just say it's these disciplines are impoverished if they are moved out of the sphere of interaction between meaning, society, and reality.
Thank you.
I'm sorry if this has gone on too long. I've never had a class like this before with a 3-hour. I think I'll manage it better next time. It's just it's an unfamiliar form for me. It must be quite exhausting for you too. So, well, I'll finish then. Do you want to have any closing comments? Well, you may feel there's an irony in me talking about catalysts as you're sinking into exhaustion, but I hope that the idea of a catalyst lives on in your mind and you are more and more excited by it in the days ahead, and that we can transform your intellectual academic being within or outside